Hello, everyone, and welcome to a semi-minimalist version of Office Hours. It's great to have you with us. As you know, we do this every single day, and we've been here for 1,660-something days, so it's been going for a long time, and we will keep it going today, even though we had a guest originally scheduled in for today. They were unfortunately had to cancel pretty close to the last minute, so we have a thin thing going on, but it runs under the same rules. We are here to answer your tech questions. We do that 7 days a week. And if you'd like to put your questions in, and we have a small group of questions today, but not a huge group, so you are welcome to get your thoughts tossed in. You can use that using our Q&A system, Mukana. You can also vote the questions up or down there and discuss them with others. And in the back end of this, if you go to officehours.global or use the QR code, which I'm going to toss up on the screen right now, it gives you a way to put your questions in, and your questions really determine the run of the show, what we talk about, and how long we talk about it. It's going to be probably a semi-abbreviated show today, unless you have some questions that we can chew on at length. And it's just Alexander and me here on the panel today. So we're keeping our check boxes checked. But Alexander, good morning. Welcome to everything. Do we have our first question for today?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. Our first one comes from Paul Wallus in Austin, Texas. Lens filters are great for protecting your camera lens from scratches. What guides your choice of what lens filters to use?
Well, lens filters are really a pretty solid piece of the photography world, and there are some lens filters that don't do much of anything, one of which is the standard 1A sky filter, and that's the filter every time I bought a new camera for the history of my career, I would find a 1A that fit the lens, and most of you know that lenses come in diameters and millimeters, so small camcorders might have a 52 millimeter lens or a 58 millimeter, something like that. You go up to the big cameras, Betacams and things like that, you're up in the 77 millimeter, sometimes even a little more than that. These are the screw-on lenses that go on the actual lens of your camera. That's one way to handle filters. The other way, of course, is matte boxes, which are a little more complicated and allow you to drop in and pull out lenses. But you're talking about protection lenses, so that's kind of the first thing I would do. A 1A sky filter doesn't do very much to change your image. It'll maybe darken the skies a little bit, but its primary purpose for me was to do exactly what you're saying, which is if you're out shooting somewhere and the wind blows up and some little bit of particulate comes slamming into your lens, you'd rather have it slam into the filter rather than the lens itself, because lenses are notoriously expensive to get fixed, and that front element, particularly if they have to replace that, that's a complex and expensive process. A filter might cost you anywhere from $20 to $150 if you get one of the really slick, perfectly clear ones. I've also seen people put things like not polarizing filters so much, but slightly different, slightly more specialized than a 1A. For example, I've seen people in Arizona back when I lived there put a little neutral density filter on the front of the camera rather than that 1A filter, just to cut down the amount of light coming in, because that practitioner might be shooting a lot outdoors in uncontrolled light, and it can get very bright. So bringing down the amount of light going through the lens made sense in that case. Alexander, what's your experience with this? What do you use? What's cool for you?
Usually a UV filter would be the one that I put on there, and I tend to stick with brands that I trust, that are well-known. So I use a lot of Tiffin products. That's a good brand. Nissi's also another good brand. I think B&W is another brand.
Yeah, B&W is one of the ones I used to use a lot.
Yeah. I would recommend, these, like a UV lens filter, even from a good brand like Tiffin, they're really, really inexpensive. There's no real reason to go to Amazon and buy some knockoff because the glass is going to be substandard. So something like a UV lens would be a good idea if you don't want it to affect the filters, the color of that's coming in. Polarizing lenses, any filter, anything covering the lens is obviously going to protect it. The problem that I discovered real quick with polarized lenses, even just slapping a polarized lens in here didn't really make sense in a controlled studio because it affects the skin tones and it does not look good. I learned that pretty quick. So UV lens is pretty much the only one that I use.
Yeah, the other trick with lenses is you don't want to use an IR filter because it keeps you from being able to do the trick where you take your remote control from your TV, point it directly at your camera, press the button, and you should be able to see the light. If you put an IR filter on it, you will no longer be able to see your remote controls for whatever work that's worth. Let's slip into the next question.
John Foltz in Ceilings Grove, Pennsylvania is asking, I have some unused equipment, but still good equipment. Where is a good place to list it for sale? What do panelists do?
This is a tough one. Alexander, I'm going to let you start it off, then I'll dive in on some of this.
For years, many of us used Craigslist, and then when Facebook Marketplace came along, I completely switched over. So I do everything now through Marketplace, and I can't really explain it. I mean, I have a few theories. I find that I'm able to move products a lot quicker through there, and I get responses a lot quicker through Marketplace. And there's a couple of things I think that contribute to it. One is just the sheer amount of time that people spend in Facebook. So Marketplace is just yet another tab inside the app that you can doom scroll forever. I find myself constantly searching for vintage gear all the time. Like, that looks good. Oh, that's a great deal, right? But when I put it up for sale there's something about seeing the photo of the person that's selling the product and the real name of that person that just somehow makes me trust that person more than just a plain text, ugly ad in Craigslist, and you have no idea who's behind it. So I think psychologically, Facebook Marketplace seems to work better, and I've had really good results for it. So, and I recommend using it if you haven't tried that. Of course, you need a Facebook account. Not everybody wants one. I get that. But if you already have an account, you should try it.
Yeah, I agree with 100%. It's one of those weird things. Selling things on the used aftermarket has been a little problematic in the old days, and you never know. And you have to figure out a place to meet, and is this going to be somebody that you really want to know too much about you? I mean, it's just a wide open space, and I agree that Facebook Marketplace, the doom scrolling piece of that is something that catches me every once in a while too. You get into that, which is so easy because it's there if you happen to be checking your Facebook contacts or things like that. The next thing you know, you spend a half an hour looking through all the weird stuff. I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to shed as much of the older gear as I possibly can, and I've gone through this process 2 or 3 times already. I'll probably go through it another half a dozen times because you're always trying to hold on. Oh gosh, I used to love that. Or in the case of me, if you've got something that you've really become good at using, for example, I still have a Bowens flash set. I don't use flash very much, but I still have one camera that can sync with it. And I can do things with that in still photography that I literally cannot do with anything else. Having a set of strobes that you have precise tenth of a stop control over, particularly in portraiture, or if you're doing photography of anything where you really want to model light super precisely. I really appreciate what my phone can do, and I appreciate the new standards, which is everything has such sensitive chips that you can get a lot of the same kind of feeling with different kinds of lights. But learning photography with point sources that you could move around and then adjust precisely by radio control was just such a joy in terms of being able to sculpt things with light that I would miss it. And at eventually some point, it's probably worth nothing. I mean, it's a light kit that I paid well over $1,000 for, and it's probably worth $50 at a yard sale now, if you can find anybody to take it. But that's just the way the system goes. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, the classic rock band Head East has their keyboard player playing a mini Moog with a keyboard around their neck and the sound generating electronics in a separate enclosure. How would they do that before MIDI was available?
Well, you're taking them back away because MIDI, I think, was invented in 84? So you've got 50 years of that technology. In fact, I think I looked it up really quickly on Craigslist to make sure that on Wikipedia to make sure that I wasn't giving out the wrong information. And I think it was 50 years old last year. So you have to go back pretty far to find that. That used to be in the 70s when you would see the MTV music videos that more than occasionally a keyboard player wanted to get out from behind the on-stage stand kind of keyboard rig and would strap a keyboard around their neck and play it on stage. I always wondered how they could do that. That seems like a very odd physiological thing to do, but they managed to do it. Alexander, what do you think?
I wish I had a photo of this, and I think Douglas posted a photo. I just can't pull it up here and bring it into the show. But if this was pre-1983, which is when MIDI was generally available, I'm assuming it was in the 70s, a copper wire. I mean, you can we've actually been able to remove electronics from like the body. For example, if you think of a microphone, right, a studio tube condenser microphone, oftentimes those microphones have an external power supply, right? So you don't need phantom power. So that stuff is in a separate box with just a big, thick, multi-pin copper wire that's sends that power that's required. So I mean, we've been able to do that for a long time. So I'm assuming that's how they did it. It's just and when I looked at the photo, it looked like a big fat copper wire, a multi-pin cable. So not really that complicated.
Probably some 8-pin DIN or something like that they had a lot of signals wired back and forth. I'm trying to even remember the names. I think Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer would do a couple of things on stage with something. I was trying to remember who else I might have seen over the course of years, the really good keyboard players who wanted to have more stage presence, so they'd strap on one of those odd-looking keyboards. I've got a couple of things in my brain, but I just can't pick out the artist name because it's been such a long time. So if you want to do that, good luck. But it's a classic historical look from probably the 1970s. I think Alexander was exactly right about that. So I don't know who, but there'll be somebody out there. I just searched under neck-worn keyboard, and unfortunately all I got was all sorts of typing keyboards. Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallus in Austin, Texas asks, many YouTubers film interview videos in a corner of a room because it can create a focused visual aesthetic, maybe natural light. How would they set up and arrange their production gear for this?
Well, I'm sitting in that environment right now. I don't know if you can see, but behind me in the corner of the room, you're looking at a corner. This is a standard kind of like slightly large bedroom. This was set up as an office, so it's got the built-in shelves behind me and things like that. But it gives you the longest geometry. Obviously, the longest dimension in any square will be corner to corner. There's also a couple of other advantages. Just in terms of sound, not facing flat walls means you're not going to maybe get a standing wave or some sort of audio anomaly. But in terms of distance, that's what you fight for on most locations, is to get the most camera to subject and subject to background distance. So moving into a corner can be very useful. I also agree with you, Paul, that the aesthetic of some depth visually helps you kind of achieve that in your shot. And that old Mac 128, my original Mac that I got back in 1984, is so far over my shoulder that it's easier to throw it out of focus and make it soft and therefore not distracting in the picture. So I think most of that focused visual aesthetic, maybe not entirely is there because they like the look, but maybe because they're just looking for the distance or something like that. As to how you set up and arrange your production gear, you're always, and this is me as a videographer, you're always working in layers. I'm always trying to figure out what's my foreground that I want people to see. That's usually my subject, the people involved in the shot or whatever. What's going to be the longest distance I can get for a background, so I have some options in terms of lighting and making it seem deep. And also, what is that critical distance between the camera itself and my subject? Because that's going to determine depth of field, and if you add the right lenses and the right lighting, it's going to give you more that painterly look. When you think about the traditions of art from painting, those were some of the big transitions in art, moving from flat landscapes and things like that to things that had more depth. And one of the tricks that they used for doing that was pushing depth of field by making the background a little more blurry or focused. Then the other thing they did was light the things you want people to look at. So all in all, YouTubers do it, I think, because everyone does it, because it gives you the most flexibility in terms of getting the shot that you want to get and the frame that you want to get. Hopefully that helped a little bit. Let's move on to the next question.
This one comes from me looking for some advice. How would you broach the subject of raising rates with a longtime client who has been getting the better end of the deal?
This is one of the most delicate things. Everything is a negotiation when you're in business for yourself, and they're all important. And it's also the reason that I've had strategies, and I learned strategies throughout my business career. For example, you have a tendency when you're first in the business to say, I can get this work if I lower my rates. But I think what you're talking about, Alexander, is that once you establish that benchmark of where your rate is, the next thing you do is try to get them off of that into more money, and it's very difficult to do. It's also really difficult to figure out what their expectations are. Some clients have expectations. Some clients have no expectations, and they're waiting for you to tell them. And if you go in thinking that, oh gosh, my cap on this project, and I'm going to pick a completely random number that has nothing to do with reality. But let's say you said, okay, this video should be $5,000, random number. You may find out down the line that they had $50,000 budgeted for it, and you've just really cut yourself off from a lot of potential, not just profit, but learning and ease of production, because the bigger the budget you have, it does get more complex, but you can do more things, which means you can learn to do more things, which means you can improve yourself to get those kind of budgets as a standard. Are there any other particular questions that you're interested in terms of the negotiation piece of it? Yeah.
So one of the challenges that I have, and I know a lot of people raise their rates on a yearly basis. That's not uncommon, a certain percentage, but the challenge that I have right now is that I am dramatically, I had a great conversation with someone about this, and I kind of knew this for a while, but until I really thought about it and actually calculated based on what I'm charging, when I actually broke it down to an hourly rate, I'm actually losing money. I'm not actually profiting, making anything. So for me, I would have to dramatically increase what I'm charging, but I feel like that's going to come at a shock to the client, because it's not like I could raise it 10% or 15% or even 20%, still not going to be making a whole lot of money. So he's getting the better end of the deal. And basically, other people have told me, it's like, look, this person is preventing you from actually getting work that will actually make you money. It's it's the one and only client that I have because I have a full-time job, but it would be nice that if I am going to only have one client, that they could actually pay me what I'm actually worth for their production. And if I look over the last 3 years of work that I've done for this client, you can see as I've upgraded the studio, upgraded the cameras, increased my knowledge, you can see the dramatic production quality increases over the years, but I haven't really raised my rates all that much. So it's a delicate thing.
It is a conundrum. One of the things that I did really, really early in my career was I went to the Small Business Administration. They used to have these little seminars, and I listened to an accountant once talk about that process of figuring out your actual costs, valuing your time, and they started with simple exercises that any CPA would guide you through as they're studying business. Here's the number of hours you have in the course of this year coming up. Here are your hard expenses over the course of that. Now, how much money do you want to make? How much money do you want to take home? And I understand in the beginning of your career, it's like, I just want to learn how to do this business and establish myself, so I don't need to take a lot of money out of this. That's on one end of the spectrum. In the middle of the spectrum is, I just want to make a living so I can keep doing this and not be at a loss. And then the top end of that is that I want to push so that I make enough profit to make this a comfortable life and to be able to get my goals, to get better equipment and to get better at this and maybe get some bigger clients that'll be more fun to work with. Each of those three tiers that you're looking at, you have to calculate a little bit differently. You're still going to have only so many hours to sell to clients. And that was one of the disciplines that going through that early Small Business Association or administration thing put me through. It says, it got me to the point where I said, if I don't sell this many hours at this much money, this is a charity. And only when I get beyond selling this number of hours, it also got me to look at my hours as my inventory, which I think is an incredibly powerful thing. Because it means that if a client says, last minute, we're not going to be able to shoot today, he's stolen my inventory. because I don't have that day if he's out on Thursday that I can sell to somebody else. And that's a loss for me. It's a tangible loss because time is more valuable actually than money or anything else, because time is the one asset you have that's always disappearing. So I think you're thinking in the right way. If you want to turn this into a more profitable business, if this client isn't contributing to you be able to put food on your table, pay your taxes, buy your equipment, depreciate the equipment and replace it over the rest of time, and everything else that goes into those standard business calculations, you're not going to survive doing it for too long because you'll always be in deficit. And at some point, you have to get to that. Most better clients understand those rules the same way that, I had to learn them through there and just by the seat of my pants as I was building my business. If you don't pay attention to the numbers, to the metrics, it's so typical for all of us who are in the creative arts to go, I just want to do this work. I just love shooting videos, or I just love making music or whatever. But if you don't get the discipline of saying, how can I sustain this career over time, you will eventually not be able to do what you want to do unless you're very lucky. I had moments in my career where I was sitting across from somebody negotiating a deal, and I learned tricks. First, to interrogate them and try to figure out what they were trying to get accomplished. Why are we sitting here talking about this video? And if you get them, the luckiest thing I learned is that if you get them to tell you that they have a problem that is costing them money, you are golden, because if you can legitimately say, I can help solve your problem, you legitimately have a reason to take some of the delta between the money they're losing now and the money they won't be losing if your solution for them is effective. So asking for what the problem is worth to them, or asking for a reasonable percentage of that. So I used to use this example. Let's say they have this problem. They're a medium-sized company, but they lost $1 million last year in lawsuits about safety violations or something like that. If you think honestly you can make a video or a series of videos or work with their staff and figure out where the safety things are and make an effective training video that eliminates 50% of those problems, you're saving them $500,000 a year. That becomes totally reasonable to ask them for a significant budget to solve that problem. Because if you're taking, and I'm making numbers up again, but if you're taking $100,000 for the work that you're going to do in this year, but you're going to save them $500,000, that is a deal that any business person will take every single day if they can figure out how to do it. So sometimes it's understanding, why do you want to make the video? What is it going to do for the client? And then legitimately just asking them, how can I help you solve a problem that's costing you more than you're going to pay me? Because they'll do that over and over again all the time. But you have to identify that problem. Why is this video being made for that? You raised your hand, so you want to just talk about it a little more?
A couple things. First of all, there's a lot of great conversation in the chat right now, and I wanted to bring that up. But also, I've talked to a lot of people about freelancing before. And Bill, what you said, I've never heard anybody say that. It's really opened up my mind. The whole thing about treating it like someone stealing your inventory, I think is really fascinating perspective and angle and way of looking at that as well. And some of the people in the chat too were saying that maybe it would be better to also just raise my rates gradually, but do it more often over time. That might be less of a shock of saying like, okay, well, now I need, 50% more, which they may not be able to afford. But if I maybe do it gradually over the course of a year, that maybe might
Let me
be
push
more
back on you a little bit
palatable.
that you're assuming it's a shock for them. I have sat across the desk from clients, and it turns out that what I thought was a shocking figure was shocking for them because it was so low. I didn't understand. My expectation was, boy, if I can get $15,000 for this video, I'll be in clover. And they were going, can I get it for under $80,000? And that delta between what I was thinking they expected and what they actually expected is a huge missed opportunity for me. because you don't know at the start what they're, and this is part of the negotiation, sitting at the table across from the decision maker and saying, what is this project really worth? What do they think it's worth? This is that delicate negotiation dance you have with every client. They want to pay as little as they can. That's fine. So do I. When I go to the grocery store, I want to pay as little as I can for the basket of groceries. But at some point, you have to agree that this endeavor that we're doing has these parameters, and one of them is the value to both of you. Each of you has to be comfortable with that value you're putting in, your time, your equipment, your expertise, all the learning you went through. They are usually putting in the trust in you to solve the business problem, the financial problem that is the reason they are doing this video. And there are numbers that indicate both of those things. Here's what I need. Here's the number I need. And for you, here's what I can afford to do to fix this problem that hopefully is going to create a return for me. If you look at it in terms of those things, it's not personal. It's not, you don't like me, so you don't want to pay me very much, or I just want to grind this guy down into dust so that he gets nothing out of it, and I keep every single extra nickel in this transaction. And you will run into both these. I've run into both these kind of people. I've run into the grinders, and I've run into people. I've actually had clients over the course of time say, "What's the problem with this?" And I said, "Well, I'm about 6 months away from the new camera that I think would do a great job for this." They said, "Well, bill me $15,000 and go buy the camera. Bill it up front." I went, "What?" I never thought that was even on the table. But if they trusted me that I could do this job for them, and they wanted this relationship to work out, and they had this huge pot of money back there because they were a pretty large company, they'll make that work for you. This whole idea of getting to know your clients and getting to understand their needs and their wants and what they're capable of doing, and being honest and upfront and having them trust you. That trust bond is probably, in my experience, the single most important thing you can develop with a customer. What other questions do you have? Because I don't want to just keep rambling.
I think, first of all, that's phenomenal. I think that's a lot of great advice. And you're right. And oftentimes I get so wrapped up in my own head about, I put these ideas in my own mind, and I self-sabotage about,
we all do.
Oh, they're going to say this, or they're going to just say no. And half the time, like actually the last 2 times I raised my rates with this client, I thought, oh, they're never going to go for it. And they said, sure, no problem. So it's like, it makes you realize, how much more room do I have to go up?
You're right to think that way, and it's not that you want to get all the way up to the top. Some business people do. For some people, it's always about, how do I maximize everything I'm getting out of this transaction? But I haven't found that to be the norm. What I've found is that the solutions, if everybody concentrates on the solutions that make the most impact on their part of it, and you work really hard to be a good solution for them, what does that mean? It means that when you promise something, you deliver it. It means when you go for meetings, you show up on time and you're appropriately attired for the environment you're going into. If you're working on a motorcycle video, you show up in your black T-shirt and your oil-stained jeans, and everybody feels comfortable because you're part of that. But if you show up in the C-suite, you're dressed appropriately for that. All these little things just makes them feel comfortable about you. When you're in a meeting with the mid-level sales team and maybe a division sales manager, and the CEO walks in and you're introduced to them, can you speak their language? Can you shake their hand, look them in the eye, and give them a feeling of confidence? Because if you can do that kind of thing, then they become more confident in you. And then when your competitors try to get into that deal and take that business from you, they're going to feel, I feel safe with those guys. I don't know about the new people. It's still possible to lose a client, but it's really hard. I got to tell you, I had one of my largest clients get pulled out in a situation like that, and 3 weeks later, they were back going, they just didn't get us, and you get us. And my budgets increased by 50% after that, because they had tried to go somewhere else and they realized the value that we were bringing. Why? Because we had been there 5 years, and we went in, and instead of their people telling us that in this scene you need that guy in a back belt because he's going to be lifting something, we're doing it. Why? Because we've been on set, we paid attention, and we understand that this shot will get rejected unless that person is wearing this gear. And that's the kind of intangible value that these relationships build for you. Anything else coming up? We've been kind of going along for a while.
I think that basically covers it. I just it gives me a lot to think about, and I'm going to have a conversation with him about it. But that's great. That gives me a lot to chew on. Just
congratulations. I mean, you've done this. You've kept them around for a long time. You've learned a lot. Obviously, you have the skills now. But that self-doubt, it's not that I don't think any person who has that, and I think we all do at some point. I don't care how strong you are in terms of ego and your ability to believe in your things. Some little, is this okay? Is everything all right? Are they okay? Can be a really important part of this. Again, it's that relationship building that is really going to make you more bulletproof than your rates, than your gear, than anything else you can do. It's learning how to read people and talk to them on their level and make them feel comfortable that you are the solution to their problems, because that's why someone pays somebody else. I've said this for all of my career. Outside of this is my family, the only reason you give another person money is because you believe that person, by giving them money, will solve a problem that is costing you more money than you're giving them. That's kind of the central point to all these business relationships. The problem can be I'm hungry. And so, I can afford $10 for this meal so I won't be hungry. Well, you're solving that problem. At the big end of corporate, I need to spend a video for a national level commercial, and the budget is going to be $4 million to do this commercial. What are you solving? You're solving a problem of their media budget is $100 million. And so they need that to be effective. So they need to work with professionals who have a long history and track record of creative and execution and insurance profile and everything else to work at this level to create a thing that's going to maximize the potential that when they broadcast out that $100 million worth of media time, it's going to affect sales significantly more than $100 million. And that's going to come into the company, and then everybody's happy. That's why everybody along the chain comes back for the next one and the next one and the next one, is because the entire value chain from the person shooting the camera, operating the camera, all the way up through all the levels is providing enough value for what you're doing. So there's my 2 cents on that, having
Thank you.
scrambled through this. Let's go on to our next question.
Sure. Our next one's coming from Paul Wallus in Austin, Texas. What's the best app on Mac, PC, Android, and iPhone to eliminate duplicate photos on Google Photos?
There's a lot of different software, and this is one thing where software is getting better and better at this. For a lot of time, I used a program called Tidy Up. I think I still have it back on my computers, and it does this entirely through metadata. It's going to compare a lot of classifications of metadata, and for photos, it's particularly good. It looks at not just the format, and the name of the photo, because names can change, but it looks at size and it looks at density, and you have a bunch of criteria. And when it finds true duplicates, it brings them together and says, gives you, I think, 3 state choices. Do you want to eliminate all but one? Do you want to eliminate all but one on each of the multiple drives that you're searching? Or do you want to only eliminate so many of these duplicates so that you always have backups on separate drives and things like that? It's sophisticated at that level. I think there's a lot of software that does that kind of thing. Again, I've used Tidy Up. I don't know whether everybody in the chat that's happening parallel. I actually don't have the chat up today, so I'm not seeing it. So
Paul Buchan is actually saying, I think Google Photos has a built-in way of showing duplicates. I did some research on this, and I didn't find any information that said Google Photos has a quick and easy way to just automatically detect them and then just delete them. So I think you're right, Bill, that you may need a third-party tool still.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's one that's on PC. I'm a Mac guy, as everybody famously knows, and so I've used TidyUp for a long time to do that. I haven't had to use it in quite a while. In fact, I probably should go back and use it again. It gets complicated, particularly if you're doing, if you have, if you're, say, a still photographer, and this is your archive of things. You don't just want the original in one place and a backup. Sometimes you want 2 or 3 backups, and you want to know what are in cloud backup or on hard drives stored and things like that. So one of those things, and we talk a little bit about the fast organizers. I'm trying to remember the name of the program that I use for that. Disk Creator. I think it just. I'm not going to remember it right now. But it'll tell you all the instances. You put in a hard drive, it's going to scan everything through there. It's going to give you all that data. Then you export that data and toss it into something like TidyUp, and it'll go through and exactly tell you what all the duplicates are and kind of how big they are and what their criteria are. Hopefully that helps, Paul. Next question.
This one's from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Having a good conversation with both of you. What could I have done better? I am old. I can take criticism. I think this is in reference to his interviews on Conversation with Tony Mobley, because I was on yesterday, and I know you were on, Bill.
You were on yesterday? Awesome.
I was on yesterday, yeah.
That's great. This has been fun. So much fun. We watched Tony start. I did. I was around when Tony started doing this, and it's great when a person finds something they're really good at and really loves doing it. You can always feel that from Tony. In the conversation you had, I'm sure it was the same thing as back when I did it. I think I did it 3 years ago or something like that. It's somebody who's genuinely curious, and of all the skills that I assess in somebody that I might be doing some kind of business with, that's one of the ones that I look for. How curious are they? Because there's so much change going on out there, and you cannot get stuck in thinking that what I know today is the only things that are going to be valuable in the future, and it's this curiosity. And Tony, I give you props. You've done an amazing job. So, criticisms. The one that comes to the top of my head is I think sometimes you worry too much about the process. What you have, which is gold, is your ability to talk to somebody online in this Conversations with Tony Mobley thing and really, truly express that curiosity in a way that everybody watching enjoys too. But then I've seen you in the back end go, I'm worried about whether the iPhone is the right thing for doing this or whether I should do something else. And it's a little bit of paralysis by analysis. I've seen that in a lot of people who are constantly worried about whether their stuff is good enough to do the job. And I've seen this with people trying to buy cameras, and I've seen this with people trying to choose microphones. And I go back to a thought that I've had, which is, having something that does it is so much better than not having something, that the worry about whether camera A is 5% better than camera B, and the big sin of that is that I've known people who will not make a decision because they're afraid to buy the one that is 5% less capable or appropriate than just, I just want to scream, doesn't matter. Get either one of them. Start learning how to do the work. Don't get this paralysis by analysis, or fight it when you do. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention. And when you're doing something like your show, people will weigh in and they will give you these suggestions. What could I have done better? But honestly, the fact that you're asking means you already understand. Do the work. Incrementally get better, talk to people, ask people about what, but just don't get stuck on thinking that without it being better, it's not good. You've already cracked that one, Tony, and we're all very proud of you to have watched you come through this process and have now hundreds of shows in the bank they're valuable. They expose people, and you've learned to do this really well. Alexander, do you have some thoughts about any? Have you?
I think you covered it really well. I think, Tony, I think you just need to keep doing what you're doing. And, I remember when you first started that show, I mean, definitely like your confidence levels, you were already a pretty good listener already. But if I go back and like listen to or look at like the first episode that you did and compare it to now, you definitely have come a long way. So I think you just got to it's just iteration. You just got to keep keep doing it, and that's the only way to get better. I had something else that was in my mind, and that it's kind of escaped me. But yeah, I think just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job of the show, and yeah.
It's a relaxed day, so if you remember it, just circle back and, on that Tony Mobley question, let's go back and help him even a little bit more. Anyway, Tony, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed that as much as anything I think I've done on Office Hours. It was so much fun. Next question.
This one's from Talalik Lopez Waterman in Baltimore, Maryland. Alexander, have you found an issue in Mimo Live recently where the Zoom integration no longer sees the NDI virtual camera?
Did you run into that, Alexander?
I don't use NDI Talalik, but I do use Mimo. I've had some issues with the Zoom integration the one particular thing, which I believe is fixed now in the latest version that just came out, I think a couple of weeks ago. It was in beta for a while, and I think it was SDK related. But I had an issue where the pick list that would show, like if you look at your source and it would show the list of the participant names, that for some reason would not refresh. And I had a couple of weird instances where I had to delete the source, recreate it, and suddenly the list of names would be there. And I believe that was fixed in the latest version. So I can't speak to the NDI issue. I don't know if that's related at all to that particular issue. I know that there's a new beta that has just come out as well. So if you haven't looked at the release notes, I know some of the issues in the release notes of the current beta that just came out a few days ago are something that I've been affected by some of those issues. So I'm probably just going to test that beta release this weekend, which I know should never use beta software. But there's one issue in particular with YUV video sources that was affecting me, that was affecting the color reproduction that really bothered me. So I think I may test that this weekend and see how that goes. So I can't speak to the NDI issue, but Oliver's a great guy. Reach out to them. He's been helping me for the last few weeks. I mean, we've been spending like 1 to 2 hours every week helping, and he's been helping me build my template, my session up, and he's been helping me resolve a bunch of issues and just increase the general overall production quality of what I can do with Memo. So I'm sure he can help you with that for sure.
Let's head on to the next question.
From Brody Hefner in New York City, NAB 2024 in New York City reported that among the 65,000 registered attendees, about 50% said they were first-time attendees. Does that seem like a high percentage for this established industry event? Thoughts?
It is a big percentage. I'm a little surprised at that, but in another way, I'm not. The whole conference landscape seems to be rearranging itself out there, and I'm not sure NAB has felt like there's a renewal, that the old guard, and I've been going long enough to NAB to have seen different eras with different kinds of attendees. I think these shows are changing. I was interested when NAB stopped doing Monday through Thursday format and opened it up for Saturday and Sunday for the general public. When I was starting out, very few members of the general public, in quotes, went to NAB. It was an industry trade show, and everybody wore suits and jackets, and it had, these are the people who were buying helicopters to cover news and things like that. So it was a very high-end, complicated, technical show, and only technical people and business people who were involved in things like broadcasting, National Association of Broadcasters, showed up. Over the course of the years, that's very much different. And now that everybody with a camcorder is shooting content for the web and things like that, you can see why people who are not at the high end of the business would be curious. I've said a couple of times on the show that I'll never forget the first time that a VP in one of the businesses that I was working with casually said, well, when are we going to go out and shoot the B-roll? And it stopped me in my tracks because I was going, why does that guy even know what that term means? This was maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And I started to realize, the language of our industry is becoming general and language, that everybody is interested in video production now in a way they never were before. And I think that's why shows like NAB now have a much broader appeal to a much broader swath of the audience. So that 50% said they were first-time attendees really doesn't surprise me. It's because almost 100% of the public can now be interested in video production should they choose to be. And that's a change that I had never seen before. Alexander, your thoughts?
I think you hit on it, and that was my thoughts too. And it's completely anecdotal, but I have heard about this increase in new attendees that have never been to not just NAB but other conferences, even AES and all the other ones. And I think it has a lot to do with what you said, Bill, is content creators. And I think we've seen a number of entrenched incumbents that have come out with these products at these lower price points now that have made things more attainable. And a lot, especially NAB, which was, is typically for broadcasters, but now we see a lot more that sort of bridging the gap between prosumer and high end. And I think that's really drawn the attention of a lot of YouTubers that have like, oh, well, there's gear that I can actually afford now.
Plus, you get a taste of it. By virtue of the fact that you can pull out your phone from your pocket, shoot a piece of content or shoot something, a demo or whatever, and have it from your home computer up on the web for the entire world to see should they know about it and want to look at it. That is a radical change in communication infrastructure that has spread across our entire world, changed the whole game. So now the question is, how does everybody get their mind around how to do that, should they choose to? And so one of the things that's been fascinating to me is that all these new people are coming in, and a percentage of them want to get better. They're realizing they're watching the creators who didn't come out of the broadcast system, and the creators' work often looks as good, if not better, than the traditional broadcasters. They are quicker and more agile to change things. They are innovative. They certainly can make content that was impossible to make when I was coming up in the business. I mean, these people who go up at the top of a gigantic tower and shoot themselves with GoPro rigs and things like that, flying across landscapes and stuff like that, that was literally impossible to achieve in the first 20 or 30 years of my career. Nobody could personally jump out of a plane and come back and show a video of that. It was just not possible. The equipment didn't exist for it. Now, it's not at all unusual. And, if you go sky flying or parachuting, you can find 1,000 videos with or 10,000 videos on YouTube. So it's a category that didn't exist before, and now it does because the technological revolution we've all seen in our lifetimes. And boy, it's getting nothing but faster now, right? The idea that in 10 houses to the right or left of me, there's probably somebody operating their own drone and making videos with it is almost inconceivable from where I was when I started in the industry. And now I wouldn't take a bet against that being true, that somebody is going to be a drone pilot 10 houses to the left or right of me.
I think it's an incredible time that we live in, that somebody in their bedroom can build an inexpensive set and put an FX30 and they look better than anyone on broadcast television. And think about the budgets that they have. It's unbelievable.
It's insane. It is truly insane what is possible now. And so everybody is in this struggle. I've been reset more than a few times in my career, and they've been daunting, but they've also been incredibly energizing. The year I went to NAB on a crew, and somebody, instead of handing me an XLR cable or a BNC cable, handed me an Ethernet cable. And you're going, oh, wait, oh, what? Oh, that's the video signal. I'm going to have to learn how this works. And you reinvent yourself. You also have to understand that while that is being handed to me, somebody who'd been in the industry for 20 years, it's also being handed potentially to the 19-year-old for whom it's no different than what they've been doing in their bedroom for the last 5 years. So it puts pressure on the people who have been in the industry for a long time. And then the question becomes, how do you handle that? Do you shut down and go, I can't compete with these young people who know more about how to do skate park videos than I ever will because they've been doing them for 5 years and I've been over here shooting talking heads on a set? Or do you get excited by that and say, well, how can I bring the skills and the taste that I've spent all these years developing in terms of the lighting's wrong in this. I know I can make it better. Let me look at it. What is it? Oh, the shadow's over there. I need to bring them up a little. Or, all these little nuances that you've spent 20 years learning how to do. Can you bring those into the new environment and make it work for shooting on your phone? If you can still be relevant. If you can't, if you don't want to, then maybe it's time to move aside and let the next generation come in and do what they're going to do. So, these are the tensions, and it's always been that way. I don't think this is anything new. Let's go to the next question.
Cindy Drozda in Erie, Colorado is asking, has anyone used the VMix Zoom integration feature? I want to join the meeting with VMix, have host controls on the machine running VMix, and keep the waiting room enabled. What is the best way to do this?
Oh, you should have been here yesterday and the day before, Cindy. By the way, hello, Cindy. We love Cindy. Cindy has been on our show as a guest on our second hour and does extraordinary woodworking and shoots it unbelievably well from a home-based production point of view. So we had all our VMix guests on, starting with Jonas and those guys on the back-end stuff, and then yesterday with audio. We probably should do even more stuff with VMix because it's becoming more and more popular. But I do not do that, and I don't think Alexander has to do that. So I think the only thing we're going to be able to accomplish today is just to say, hang on to the question. We should either push it back or copy it or whatever needs to be done to bring it back in. Maybe tomorrow should be a bigger panel.
Tomorrow might be a better day for it.
Yeah, it would be a better day for that. So sorry, Cindy. Next question.
Another question for me. Any tips on letting people know you have a nice studio they can record podcasts and do remote interviews in? Should I put ads on Facebook Marketplace? Just trying to think of a few things I can do that don't cost a lot or nothing.
Yeah, this is a tough one. So home-based studios, I've had one now for 30 years, and I always kept it somewhat quiet because there's a lot of considerations about, do you want to annoy your neighbors with parking issues and things like that? This work from home hybrid world we're in, where a lot of us are doing legitimate business that we would have been in commercial space, but we're doing it from home, brings up a lot of issues. And I think everybody has to vet this one on their own terms. What is the environment? You may have plenty of room for parking, and you're not going to annoy your neighbors, and they're not going to be going, why you've got kind of commercial lighting in here. Did an electrician hook it up, and is one of your neighbors going to get upset because you parked in what they thought was their space? And I've had, when I was constructing my studio in Scottsdale, one of my neighbors ratted me out. And the people from the city came and go, we understand you have a commercial operation and this is not zoned for commercial. Thankfully, the person who came out from zoning was perfectly reasonable. And I said, no, this is my private workshop and it's my private space. And he said, that was a very good answer, because that answer says I can turn around and leave you alone to do what you're doing because you're not hurting anybody. And it was one of the more interesting days in my life. And I ran that studio there quietly. I had a couple of big shoots, and, I said, just park on the streets around here, and if anybody asks, we were just having a party. We were shooting with 15 people in my studio as if it was a training room at your central offices, and we got by with it. So what do you do? I would be careful about doing public advertising saying, come in and do a commercial thing here. I also would be careful about showing your studio with a lot of gear, although I think that's changed a little bit too. People, I don't know. This is a tough one for me. Alexander, what are your feelings about exposing your operation to the public that way?
Oh, I like to encourage intruders. No, I'm just kidding. I'm in a condo, so it's thankfully people can park on the street. There's free parking, so I don't really have to worry about that. And we have good security in our building. I'm not too worried about it. I mean, I have one client that comes in with complete strangers every single week. I don't know these people, and they come in here, and it of course you walk in here, and it doesn't look like a bar. I get the same question every time. Does anyone actually live here? Because this looks like a television studio. I've destroyed my ceiling. There are lights everywhere. There's people. It's funny when I invite friends over here or people that I don't know very well. They come in here and they go, "What's going on here? This looks like a why are there 5 cameras and lights on the ceiling?" They don't know what's going on. So I don't know. I'm not too worried about it. I mean, I suppose maybe I should be. Maybe I'm too nonchalant about it. Maybe I should have some security cameras in here. But it's definitely, you're right. I think it is a careful balance. When it doubles as both a home and a studio, you do have to be careful about that. But thankfully, I live alone, so I don't have to worry about other people here.
Yeah, a little bit. I had a friend for many years, and still is. Actually, it was somebody my wife went to college with, and we got to be friends. And he's a detective on the Phoenix Police Department, and so we used to talk a good little bit about the nature of crimes and burglaries and things like that. And what I learned from that is that really those are kind of down, and part of the reason is nobody has anything really worth taking. I guess residential burglary, that kind of stuff, is kind of on the decline because there's a risk to somebody breaking in, and when they get in, what are they going to find? They're going to find the same consumer stuff that everybody else has that's really not very valuable. Most of us don't have truly valuables in our houses. If somebody's going to want to steal from you, they're more likely to try to hack into your computer and get your bank account numbers and stuff like that than physically come into your property. So it's changed, I think, from the days when money was tangible, that you had wallets full of cash. Almost nobody has that anymore. We have credit cards protected behind pins and things like that. Or, your transactional ability to do money is on your watch or your phone, and you're swiping it, and then you've got a PIN code, or it's doing some kind of two-factor authentication in your phone. It just means that the risk of somebody coming into your home diminishes as these technologies move from, I need to break into this home to get the gear or to get the stuff. Yeah. That's it's really
not the wet bandits in Home Alone, right? We don't have jewels
exactly.
in our homes and tons of stuff.
Nobody's got some people have jewels, but not in my neighborhood. We don't have a lot of people who have safes full of negotiable stuff. So I think there's probably less risk of that. I don't feel, now some people in some neighborhoods, there might be somebody coming in there. And certainly if you're involved in anything illicit and have controlled substances, I think those people are at risk because those people are not very smart who deal in those kind of street level stuff. So yeah, that's a different thing. There may be somebody breaking your house for that. But for most people living normal lives, I just don't see the risk the way it used to be. We are no longer living in the era where there's a strong box on the stagecoach that needs to be protected with a couple of guys with shotguns. It just doesn't seem to be the way it's going. Oh my gosh, are we that close to the end of the show? What happened here? So anyway, thank you, Alexander. Let's try to get a couple more questions in. We're spinning out.
Absolutely. Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana is asking, what client comforts have you added to your production space? How do you scale such features based on production size?
So there's certain things you have to have. I would always put at the top of that list food. You always want. I don't care the size of the scope. If you've got one person coming over for interview, we would always do some sort of craft services, if nothing else. And we used to spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about that for our location shoots as well. Feed people well; they're much happier. Comforts, if you can, here's one that I learned real early. If you start working up to the fact in our studio where you have executives coming in, do not put the makeup space in the general space of the office. We built a side room on the side of our studio, and any executive would come, and if they had to go into makeup, they'd go off the side. My wife, I think, said, yeah, that guy, he's not going to be really comfortable with makeup, and the last thing he wants is to be pampered over and have somebody putting eyeliner on him in front of his downline workers. He might feel uncomfortable with that, and it was a lesson in paying attention to those kind of things, little social things. Alexander?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the nice things about my place is that I have, because it also doubles as my home too, I have a nice open concept kitchen. I have a bar area too with stools and stuff like that. So you can just come in and get comfortable, sit there. I'll make you a coffee and offer you whatever drinks you want and snacks and that kind of stuff. So I find that really loosens people up as opposed to like just getting them to walk in the door and go, okay, sit down now. I'm going to frame you. I'm going to let's go. because it just makes people nervous when they haven't been on camera before. And a lot of the people that I get in here haven't been on camera before.
That's a huge deal, is the psychological piece of that. In fact, Mickey in the chat said having them just hang out ends up us talking, brainstorming, sometimes ends up working on the project together. There is the social aspect of bringing people into that zone. I had a long, nice couch behind my edit position, a leather couch, and I had clients who would just come over, set their laptop off, and spend the whole day there while I was editing. And, we didn't even talk that much, but for them, it was getting out of their office to some place where they could nobody was looking over their shoulder. They could relax. I got instant feedback on the edits, so it was all good. So yeah, the environment makes a difference. That's what I'd say anyway. We are at the end of our time. I can't believe it. I am so sorry. I got lost in these discussions and I didn't pay attention. We are actually going to have to send some questions back, and I'm sorry about that. This was a lot of fun. I expected it to be a little bit of a struggle to get through the show, but it was not. So thank you all for adding your questions into this process. I can't remember what's on tomorrow's show. I have the wrong list here. So does somebody know off the top of their head? Well, we'll be back with another show, another hour of discussion about this. Thank you all for being here today. I truly appreciate your questions keeping us going for the entire hour. Don't forget after hours. Don't forget all the things that we talk about every day here. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Clock traversal today. Am I seeing it here? I have to get my mouse over there. 15,000 miles, 24,000 kilometers, 118 million. Bananas for scale. Navi Lens is going to be here tomorrow. Okay, great. Alexander, thank you. That was awesome. I couldn't have done this without you.
Likewise. That was really fun. Great advice. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it.
Oh, happy. I hope it helps. Those are things I learned over the course of many years.
Okay. Off to work. See you, Bill.
Adios.